All right, here with Wayne Cavadi, ncaa.com, writes on Division II sports. So Wayne, thanks for jumping on with me.
Oh yeah, thank you for having me. I love to talk baseball, especially at the Division II level. So really excited to be here.
Hey, what got you into covering Division II?
I needed a job. No, I was working for Turner Sports originally. I started there in 2014, and at that point, I was just you can call it a stringer or whatever you want to call it. I just did championships when they needed someone to go to championships, and in 2015, they said we are starting this idea of an all D2 sports micro hub. And we would want someone to just dive in and be that D2 sports guy. And I'm like, that this is a great opportunity. I could be a voice for a platform that's really never had a voice that covers everything. Yeah. So obviously, when I took that position, and again, that was the 2015-2016 season, I started with D2 football and just moved on. And my first D2 baseball championship, in Cary, you're just like, wow, this is pretty cool. So you get to watch a lot of cool programs. You get to see a Tampa play, and you're kind of sold pretty quickly that it's a fun sport to cover.
Yeah, that's the thing that I always try to remind people. Every level that we have of college baseball is really good, and that's the thing that sticks out when you go watch the championships is just how good baseball is across all levels of college.
Yeah, and I think it's with that national level and the JD Martinez's and the Josiah Grays and those guys out there, it's more of a larger D2 scope than a basketball or football, because there are, baseball is it's a large audience, but it's a very particular audience. If you love baseball, you love baseball, and you want to be there and say, I saw that guy when he was there. So I think it's a really fun sport to cover from that aspect.
Yeah, and you just came out with your Power 10 rankings, and you've got Wingate at top. And do you think that Wingate has a chance to go back to back here?
So here's the thing, and as you know, winning in the South Atlantic Conference is, it's a bunch of small private schools. It's very hard in the first place. And, last year, the Bulldogs, they may not have been the best team in Cary when you had that Tampa and Central Missouri and Angelo State team, but they played the best, and they will need to do that again, especially in that region. That's the South and Southeast. Those are arguably the two toughest regions in D2 baseball. Yeah. Repeating is not easy in the sport. Do I think they have the manpower to do it? Yes. I think they have so much returning experience from a very good team, and that's why I did give them the benefit. I know if you look at the other polls, Tampa is the unanimous number one, but because of what they're returning, and Tampa is very good, don't get me wrong. But what Wingate is returning, I'm thinking that they deserve that number one spot now, and they do have the pieces to compete. To say that right now that they're going to repeat, that's a tough order to put on their shoulders. But they definitely have the pieces, and I think they have the experience too.
Yeah, and rounding out that top 10, you've got obviously Wingate, then you've got Tampa, Colorado Mesa, Angelo State, Minnesota State, Southern New Hampshire, Northwest Nazarene, Millersville, Augustana, and then Illinois Springfield. And I think that's the cool thing with Division II baseball is there's pockets all over the United States that it doesn't matter. I think you see more northern teams in the Division II level that have a chance to compete for a national championship than you do anywhere else in the country.
Yeah. D2 baseball is so unique. You mentioned the northern teams, right? Is that you have this rolling start, right? And so the teams that play in the warm weather on the West Coast, you kind of get an early glimpse of them. Last night I have my D2 Nation podcast. We had Hayden Aguirre and Spencer Bramwell on from Colorado Mesa, and Hayden, reigning D2 player of the year. The guy just is a walking hit machine. He's sitting there telling me his freshman year, he comes from Arizona. He gets a phone call that they had to go outside and shovel before opening day and help get the field clear, right? So you have these completely different dynamics in baseball than it's especially early in the spring than you do elsewhere. And you get to really see the Southern teams play. But like you said, those Northern teams, they kind of fly under the radar because of the late starts, but they're really good. I really like the Northern Sun. I really like, the GLIAC, the GLVC, and the GMAC. They have some really good teams in there, and I really like that Illinois Springfield team. I know I'm a little bit higher on them than the other rankings, but man, they got some power there.
Yeah, Ryan Copeland's done a good job there. Took over for Chris Ramirez when Chris went to Lenore Ryan. So, yeah, Cope's done a good job at UI Springfield. That was right in my neck of the woods, coaching at Western Illinois as long as I did. So, I actually recruited Ryan coming out of high school. He ended up going to Illinois State to play for my dad and brother, but we didn't do a good enough job recruiting. I tell Ryan that all the time. He ended up being a really good college pitcher at Illinois State and pitched professionally. He's a good example of not having to be the biggest kid on the mound. He could really pitch and did get a chance to pitch professionally, and he's carried that over to UI Springfield. They've done a good job of getting some bounce backs. That kind of historically started with when Chris started the program, is they had some really good Division I bounce backs, and they've continued that. And I think that's the other unique thing with Division II is you get some D1 bounce backs. You also can take some pro guys if they haven't played long enough, so you can bolster a roster. D2 was kind of doing the transfer portal stuff before anybody else was doing it, with getting bounce backs and then some pro guys coming back that hadn't played long enough in pro ball. So I do really like Division II baseball just because I think anybody has a chance to win the national championship throughout the country.
Yeah, and Coach Urso, I mean, in Tampa, he's
it's a powerhouse there.
Yeah. And they have all those Florida, Miami U kids, Florida Gator kids that would be probably starting on any other team if they weren't in the SEC or the ACC. And then they want to go play for, you have a chance to win if you go to Tampa or a Florida Southern or any one of those schools. So you transfer to D2 and you become an ace. You have the national spotlight on you and you're playing for a championship.
What are some other things that have stuck out with the podcast when you're having guests on?
It's just, well, for one, unfortunately, is we call it baseball in the age of COVID, right? It's a learning a new way to adapt on and off the field, and I don't think the mental grind is really as noticeable as people. It's not really there. It's like, oh, the game got canceled, this series got postponed, but baseball, unlike other sports, it's momentum. Baseball is a momentum sport. And when you, especially like with these staggered starts, and you're supposed to start, most of baseball starts the first weekend of February, you're already a team, in the PSAC, and you're supposed to start February 24th. There's already teams with 10 games under their belt. And then you find out that you've got to wait another week to play, right? It's a mental grind. And I think that's something that stands out. I hate that that's one of the first things that come to my mind in the day and the age that we're in, but it really is reshaping the game in all levels. And if you want to take it a step further, I think what we saw last year due to COVID is the experience level. We're seeing a lot of guys around a lot longer, and these teams that are really good are staying really good because they've had these extra years of eligibility. And same with the bounce back, same with D1. You have these D1 students that have a graduate year, maybe no room on the current team they are because there's a bunch of freshmen on scholarship coming in, and we get to see them on the D2 level. So I think you're seeing a lot of that shape the way the game is. And, from someone that's on content and writing about this stuff, it makes for good baseball, but it's an unfortunate reason as to why. Yeah. I say that, but you look at a Central Missouri this year, and that cycle is kind of, rolled out. There's going to be a lot of new faces on Central Missouri, but in the same sense, what Kyle Crooks has done since he's been there, I'm not doubting him, right? They're definitely a top 25 team. They could have no one from last year, and they would still be a top 25 team just because of what he's done with that program.
And great coaches. You see it at every level. This is the golden era of coaching at every level of college. And you mentioned Kyle Crooks. You can just go down the list of coaches. Joe Urso. There's so many really good coaches at the Division II level, and that's carried over to kind of allowing there to be some parity no matter where the teams are coming from, just because the coaching is really, really good. Now, you talked about the start, and this is one thing that changed with Division I a long time ago. Has there ever been talk about doing a common starting date for Division II?
Not that I've been made aware of. I just think it's too difficult. And, ultimately, with the way that D2 is set up regionally, it doesn't really, as long as they get those games in, right? You need that number of games. So it really isn't going to affect anything, because when it comes down to it, to make the tournament, you just have to perform in your region.
Yeah.
So I don't think that there ever be. But that being said, with some of these more, I don't want to say new, but they're newer preseason tournaments, whatever you want to call them, like in Houston, coming, you see like Millersville's coming down, or whoever the case may be. Some of these Northeast teams that are contenders, and you find in the national rankings, you do see them traveling more to these southern state tournaments, trying to get on the board early, especially against the competition that they'll be facing at those tournaments.
What are some other tournaments early that people need to pay attention to here starting out of the gate?
There's I can't remember the name of it down in Florida, but there's that one in Florida, and then the one in Houston. You got Central Missouri, and a bunch of the GAC teams, and you look at that Great American Conference, and there's a bunch of those teams getting started in Houston, and I think I really like the Great American Conference this year, with the Northern Sun and Central Missouri up there. That central region is usually heavily dominated by them, but you got Southern Arkansas Monticello, which I believe is at the Houston Classic, and Oklahoma Baptist I really, really like, and I think seeing those teams in action early on are going to be fun.
And they've had kind of a year to get through COVID here, and they have a year under their belt of maybe handling protocols. And you mentioned baseball being such a rhythm sport. Once you start, you really want to keep going. We are the one sport where once you start, you do really want to keep playing, but that's going to affect teams too. If a team has a shutdown in the middle of the year, hopefully we're on the back end of it here with Omicron, but that's going to affect how teams play throughout the year too. If they don't have a shutdown, if they can continue to keep playing, or if they do have a shutdown, that's going to affect some teams going forward also.
Yeah, I mean, and you hit it. Like, we look at the CC, the California Collegiate, they didn't play at all last year. We got some really good teams out there, but that, how does the year off treat them? Like a Chico State is definitely a top 25 contender. Cal State, Monterey Bay, these teams are really good the last time we saw them, but the last time we saw them was more than a calendar year ago, right? Yeah. And you're talking about momentum. That's a long layoff, and staying competitive. Batting practice only takes you so far. Scrimmages only take you so far. So it will be interesting to see how quickly they are back in the swing of things. As I mentioned, I cover all D2 sports. I can tell you, and it's fascinating, that the CCAA that didn't play basketball last year, until this week, they had 3 teams in the top 10. So we talk about the layoff possibly being a negative effect, but it could also be the positive effect that they came out ready to play, right?
Well, you have a whole year of training. That's the positive of that, is you have a whole year to train, to get into the weight room, to get on the training side that you don't normally have. It's a lot of teams do train during the year, but it's different when you're competing than when you have a whole off season like that, a lengthy off season. You should be a lot stronger, faster. All those things that you can work on in just the training setting is going to make for a better athlete and a better product on the field, regardless of the playing piece.
Yeah. And absolutely, 100%. And, just to go back to that West region with all the time off, the Pac West had that weird kind of bubble schedule. The Great Northwest didn't have everybody playing. Like we said, the CCAA didn't play. This is really the first non-COVID year without UC San Diego out there. Yeah. Like, we have an entire region up for grabs because they dominated it. And now you have all these teams chomping on the bit, finally wanting to go back out and get it, right? There's no more UC San Diego. And before them, it was Cal Baptist, right? We don't have those anymore. So we're looking for a new king. And you got the Azusa Pacifics that showed they could be, Northwest Nazarene that showed they could be these pieces. But there's a whole conference that is itching to show that it's time for them to take it. So I think, there's so much to look forward to this season, that, like you mentioned, now that we're hopefully getting past, with Omicron settling down, with the warmer months, a fully outside sport obviously is going to help. And I think it's just, I'm so excited for baseball season.
By the way, Cal Baptist has not missed a beat going from Division II to Division I. And you would assume that UC San Diego is going to do the same thing. Like, they're going to step right in and compete. Bellarmine last year had a year of Division I underneath their belt, so you're seeing some Division II teams make that transition. I think USI is getting close to announcing. I don't know if they've done that for sure, but there are some teams trying to make that jump from Division II to Division I that are competing at a high level at the Division I level, which shows you how great baseball is throughout the country, because you have teams that are making that next step up and are doing a good job of competing at the next level also. Let's do a little speed round here. So who are the two teams that you feel like are going to play for the national championship in Cary?
I think
this is just fun. I'm not holding that. I don't hold the sports writers. This is just for fun. So obviously you probably feel like Tampa's going to be there.
Eight returning bats in that lineup, all three starting pitchers from the weekend. Jordan Leisure, All-American closer, arguably, the best closer in D2 last year. That's a big hole to fill, and when I was getting my fall reports ready, obviously, when I talked to Coach Urso, that was the first thing that he said, is how do you replace that? And, I think if any coach has shown us how you replace that, it's Coach Urso, right? 8 national championships that he, if you have to worry about filling a hole, I have full faith that he's going to be the guy that does it. But yeah, that lineup is EJ Cumbo. I got to watch him first at New York Tech when they made that crazy run to Cary, and he was just freshman, just tearing the cover off the ball. And then they end their sports programs, and he winds up in Tampa. I mean, that's almost unfair to D2 baseball that you have the best hitter in baseball going to one of the top programs. So their lineup is just so stacked. So yeah, I definitely think it's Tampa. And I think the other team comes out of that South Central. I think Angelo State and Colorado Mesa, they're pretty much top 5 any poll you look at right now. It's a shame when that they have to play in the South Regional Final, and we don't get to see them possibly square off for a national championship. But I think that's where the other team comes out of is that South Central region, one of those two teams.
And that's where the regionalized format hurts a little bit at times, and that's where you saw the other levels go away from that, is because you are going to get some teams that maybe deserve to be in Cary that could play their way in if they went to a different part of the world and played in a regional format, and you might see a little bit more of a rounded out class. But again, I don't mind the regional format that D2 has, because I think it gives them something different than that the other levels don't have, is more of a regional format.
Absolutely. And another good thing that we should have touched on post-COVID is we're back to the 56 team tournament. Last year, we saw so many good teams not make it just because of, COVID. We wanted to be safe. You had to cut back those teams, less travel, less people in the stands, less teams being exposed. And we saw a lot of good baseball teams. Now, while that's sad and upsetting, you like an MSU Denver, right? They were second in the RMAC. They were a very good team. They probably have the largest chip on their shoulder in the world this year and want more than anything. And there's a bunch of teams that feel that way, that because of that regionalization, because some regions were 3-team tournaments last year to get to Cary, and now that they're back to being either 6 or 8, you have these teams that really want to show, hey, look, this is what we did last year, and we're going to do it again. We weren't a flash in the pan.
Yeah, for somebody that doesn't know that format, talk a little bit about the difference that some teams have 6-team tournaments, some teams have 8-team tournaments. Talk about that, the regional format a little bit, the difference.
Yeah, a lot of it comes down to the games played that we were talking about, like in the East and the Atlantic and that South Central because of the Colorado teams. So a lot of it comes down to the games being played, and you want to make sure with snow outs or whatever the case may be, is that you have a fair bracket. And if you expand that bracket, you could get into that gray area. Well, okay, we only have 6 teams that played the required games. Now what do we do? This team never got to play this team. We have to eliminate head to head. So whereas basketball, on the D2 level is the same, it's still regionalized, but it's the same 64 team that March Madness on the D1 level is.
And they're fighting for that. The baseball coaches, they do a really cool thing for people that don't know. D2 has a conference call every month. They have a representative for every conference that meets with the NCAA every month that we're involved with. Jim Richardson in our office actually is on that conference call, and I think that's a really unique thing that Division II does, that they have that monthly call that keeps everybody informed of what's going on, and I think they've been able to get some legislation passed a little bit quicker than some other levels because they do have that monthly conference call with the NCAA, which is awesome.
And I think that's, you asked me what I've been taking from the podcast. That's definitely one of the things, right? Is that D2 is more, everyone always says family. Whenever I ask that question, why is D2 special? Like even to a Josiah Gray, we've had him on the show that's now on the Washington Nationals, and it's family. They say that you walk off the field and there's little kids lining up for your autograph in Lemoyne, right? It's like, but that carries all the way up the ladder, right? And I've been on some of the calls for other sports just to meet the SIDs and to meet the conference chairs. And I know that they are very hands-on. They are you are a part of this. We want to hear your voice. And it does. And look, every level of collegiate sports is going to have its issues that you have to work through. Yet regionalization is a different kind of concept. So it's going to come with different kind of aspects. But as the time go, are we closer to a 64-team traditional bracket more than ever? Absolutely, right? Because there are those conversations happening. It's not just, people writing, a local beat writer writing an article, here's what's wrong. It's actual conversations that are happening that you hope that, the best product available is what these teams are getting a shot at. And I think with all the difficulties of the past two seasons, I don't know that this is the year that conversation makes it go through, but it's being had, right? And so we're definitely closer to it than ever before.
What are two teams that maybe are on the outside looking in right now that might surprise us and get to carry?
Boy, there's always outside my power 10, I think Davenport is a ridiculous team. Nolan Anspaugh, he could be player of the year. But I have them in my top 15. They're not really an outside team. If you're looking for under the radar team, is Delta State isn't really in the national rankings. Delta State is like a powerhouse program.
Historically, they're very good.
Right.
Yes.
They have Jake Barlow. Jake Barlow he's on my short player of the year watch list. They have new pitching, but they always have good pitching, right? They're very good at making sure they get the good pitching. They're in that South region.
Done a good job with junior college transfers. They've always had really good junior college transfers at Delta State. Always.
Yeah. And just, I did say a team in the top 15. So just to give you a team completely out of the top 25 that I really like Northwood. I think they have a lot of nice pieces. Again, that's one of those northern schools we're going to have to wait a little bit to see how well they do. But the MEC has several good teams that I'm watching: Charleston, Wheeling, West Virginia State, that are all going to be fun to watch. Quincy is, I feel like, I don't know why they're always an under the radar team, but they always are there they're never there at the beginning of the season if you look at the polls, but sure enough, at the end of the season, they're right there in the conversation. Completely new regime. We got a new coach there. A lot of new faces. Riley Martin's on the Cubs now, and he was their ace for so many years, but I just still think that they're a good team. But Delta State and Northwood would be my two high profile under the radar teams.
Are you going to be out at all first weekend watching? Are you going to be out trying to see some games?
So I'm in Atlanta, Georgia. Unfortunately, there's nothing close to me.
Yeah.
What I do try to get to a North Georgia game. It all depends on how that schedule pans out. I'm not going to be traveling too far with everything that's going on right now. I'm not going to make a trip to Florida or Houston or anything like that. But I do want to try to get out opening weekend somewhere that's as close as possible to me as I can.
Any other intriguing storylines that we need to pay attention to?
I think the main one is, well, first of all, what Wingate does, right? I think it was such a fascinating story that they won the whole thing, in the teams that they had to get through to win the whole thing. So I definitely think that's a great storyline. And again, just this return to what we hope is normalcy and how these rosters look, specific wise. You could get into the storylines like I mentioned earlier. What does Central Missouri look like with this new team? what's going on in Florida Southern. They've had for them, a 2-year drought is a tremendously long time, but I think they've done a good job at addressing some needs. If you want to get into team breakdown stories like that, um, one of the stories I think is this year with all the returning talent that they have and all that power is, what does North Greenville do? I'm sure you've watched them over the past few years. Michael Fail, unbelievable bat. They have a lot of question marks at pitching, and that just goes into that Southeast region. We already said Wingate, but then you got Mount Olive, North Greenville, UNC Pembroke. You have powerhouse teams there, and you just want to see what happened there. But big picture, overall thing is just return to normalcy. All the conferences are back. The West region thing, I said, who's going to be the new king of the West? And I think just this whole landscape is back. We have a 56 team tournament, and watching how it's all going to play out, I think is going to be really fun.
Thanks for jumping on with me, Wayne.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks again for having me.